affordable. Pardon me? Are we on? Just started. Okay, sorry for that. Just getting our WebEx organized. Good evening, Councillor Perks, Councillor Bradford. Here is part of our, nice to see you both, our Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing. And my name is Councillor Paula Fletcher, and I'm the chair of this Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing. And the clerks confirmed that we have quorum. We're a committee of 3, and I'd like to now call meeting 4 to order and welcome everyone. Thank the clerks and welcome everybody who's going to be making deputations tonight or watching us tonight. Today's meeting, as you know, is being held by video conference, and city staff are also connecting to the meeting by video conference. We have a lot of great staff with us tonight. As City Hall remains closed, the public will continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com Toronto City Council Live. That's our very own station. I ask everybody for their patience with any delays and technical issues. The clerk staff have connected all of the registered speakers to the meeting by audio, and the list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Clerk's IT staff will also be available to assist members with their devices. I'd like to remind staff to keep their mics muted and their videos turned off unless they need to answer questions or speak with the committee. And that's not because we don't like you, but because WebEx is very sometimes quirky and can override the system. This will make it easier for me as chair and those who are watching on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and as we vote on items. Members, I know you know this already. Please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item, and then ensure your video is turned on. As part of each agenda item, I'll ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they want to question staff or speak. I will then create a speakers list and call on members when it's your turn to speak. When voting on an item or a motion, I'm going to ask you to ensure that you turn on your video and raise your hand to indicate your vote. I also want to remind you that you have to submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at phc@toronto.ca to help with motions. And if you have any arising out of anything tonight, can you get them sent in to the clerk, please, as early as you can. If there's visiting members of council attending today, I encourage you to turn on your video so that I know that you're here and can give you the opportunity to ask questions or ask questions of staff or to speak. And this will assist the clerks to record the attendance for tonight's meeting. Although we're in different locations and meeting remotely, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Members, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, raise your hand or unmute your mic. I don't see any. Thank you very much. Next, we need to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on September 24th, 2020. Councillor Bradford, would you like to move that? Moved by Councillor Bradford. All in favor? That passes. Thank you. Let's proceed to the agenda review. We have 2 items tonight, and we have a lot of interest in these items with quite a few speakers on both. First item, RH 4.1, Tenant Support Grant Program Updates, and item RH 4.2, Work Plan on the Preservation of Affordable Rental Housing. We have a staff presentation on item 2. After speaking with the clerks today and looking at all the materials, members, I'd like to introduce a motion to reorder the agenda and have item number RH 4.2 heard first because there's a presentation, then hear those speakers, and then go to item 1 after. Is that all right? Can I have a motion, Councillor Perks, to reorder? Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? That is passed. Thank you very much. So, on RH 4.2, Work Plan on the Preservation of Affordable Rental Housing, I'm going to ask that we have the presentation, and then we will go to our speakers after that. And there's the fantastic Sherry Hanley all ready to present. And I'm sure you have all the technical glitches worked out so that everybody who's watching on YouTube or part of this meeting can follow along with you. So thank you very much.
No pressure. Thank you, Councillor.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay, thank you. So we wanted to start off this evening with a presentation based on feedback. We wanted to let folks where we are in terms of what we've done and where we want to go. So we've put together this presentation that outlines a few things. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I want to start off by giving a big thank you to the advisory group that we've had in place since February of this year for their support, advice, understanding, and flexibility. Our work has been interrupted by COVID in terms of the work we've been able to achieve, as well as our ability to meet in person. So we have had some challenges that way, so I want to say thank you. And I also want to say a big thank you to all the people who've given their time since November of last year through this committee with their deputations. Some really frank feedback in between sessions and input provided. So I just wanted to say that off the top. Today in the presentation, I want to give you a recap of how things connect to the Housing TO Action Plan, the work that was directed to the advisory committee and the advisory group and staff, progress we've made in spite of COVID. There was a motion at the last meeting around getting some data. We don't have as much data as we'd like, but we have a snapshot of what we do have that shows some of the flaws and the need to continue on the work as outlined by a few motions from Councillor Bradford and Councillor Fletcher in the past cycle, and then outline some ideas in terms of 2021 and 22. Next slide, please. So first of all, we developed a Housing TO Action Plan. We consulted over 6,000 residents across Toronto, and rental issues were a pretty big part of the action plan. It was adopted in 2019. This plan will be guiding all of our work over the next 10 years. And we have annual implementation plans that will be brought forward every year. The most recent one, or the very first one, was adopted in September of this year. Specific to rental housing, the action plan speaks to, or preserving rental housing, speaks to property standards and inspection, repair and energy retrofits, and improving aging buildings. It talks about establishing a tenant advisory committee, which is why we have one of the recommendations we do today that looks at broader issues in addition to evictions. City planning had some recommendations on reviewing the rental demolition and replacement practices. And we also had pretty clear recommendations on multi-tenant dwelling homes, protecting, preserving them, and protecting the security of tenure for those tenants. Rent evictions, dem evictions, and illegal evictions were a really big theme that we heard throughout the action plan. Next slide, please. With respect to directives coming out of the subcommittee last year, this time, they were directives to staff and to the newly created advisory group. So I just wanted to outline what we were tasked to do and outline in more detail what we were able to achieve going forward. And I had some advisory group members want me to reiterate the fact that we were not able to get everything done that we wanted to due to staff redeployment and inability to meet in person and changing priorities. But we were asked to look at proposing amendments to the Residential Tenancies Act, recommending improvements to eviction prevention supports, developing communication material to educate tenants on rights and awareness and programs, developing a city response to illegitimate tenant evictions, and improving data collection and analysis. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to highlight some of the progress we've made in 2020. Next slide, please. So the first piece I want to speak to is the work we did on Bill 184. The province, just before COVID, introduced Bill 184 that was proposing amendments to several pieces of legislation, including the RTA. This is important to us because we had recommendations. The province has jurisdiction over landlord-tenant issues. So this is really where, if we're trying to get some change around residential tenancy issues and relationships, this is where a lot of it needs to come from. So we developed a submission with input from the advisory group, and council adopted that submission and made some amendments. Specifically, I believe it was Councillor Perks who moved a motion that city legal challenged certain amendments of Bill 184 on the basis they're contrary to procedural fairness and natural justice. So that really spoke to a lot of the issues where we were talking about tenant issues and supports for tenants and the imbalance between tenants and landlords at the LTB. And the status on that is City Legal is still working on the notice of application and expect it to be issued in the next 2 weeks. It's been a really complex process from what they've told us in terms of consultation with various groups, internal and external to the city, to build the case. Next slide, please. With respect to eviction prevention programs and supports, the reason this is important, obviously, not only for the individual experiencing the eviction process and their housing stability and mental health and just having a home is important, but we also know that a really big part around evictions is once a unit turns over with the lack of rent control or vacancy decontrol, we actually lose the affordability of that unit often forever, with rents increasing upon turnover. So there's an interest citywide to keep those for tenants, obviously, but also to ensure we have the affordable housing stock and we're not simply building new and losing the existing. So work we've done so far through the 2020 budget process, the eviction prevention program received an additional $1.07 million this year. The Toronto Rent Bank received a $2 million influx through Ontario Pandemic Relief Funding. And based on input, there was some flexibility to the program eligibility in terms of quantums, payback periods, and qualifications. The other report in front of us today, the RH 4.1, speaks to some changes to the Tenant Defense Fund. And that brings us to some recommendations in terms of expanding scope and quantums. We've also been advocating to extend the eviction moratorium and providing rental relief for tenants through council motions and clerks that way. And this work is continuing in terms of constant improvements going forward. There's some reports coming in December that way. Next slide, please. Development of communications materials. So there was a pretty big update at the last committee meeting on the work we've been doing. And I had some feedback, and I think we heard through the deputations as well that, you know, this is bigger than communications. Why do you think you've done such a great job by putting together a website? So I just want folks to know that from a staff perspective, we know it's not just communications, but we know a really important component of keeping people housed is for them to know what their rights are and understanding the supports that exist. So we know it's not the only thing, but given COVID over the spring, it was where we could focus a lot of our resources. So the tenant hub has been created. It's toronto.ca/renter-help. It's got its own name now that's a little more user-friendly. The intention was to launch it in detail by this committee. We had some really good feedback from folks specifically on the rent evictions section in terms of some updates and reframing. So I believe that it should be updated as of today, but we'll be doing the push out later this week on that. The ongoing work, getting the content right on the hub has been the first step, and the plan is to build out more content and more communications channels and materials using this content. So there is already drafted a tenant eviction toolkit that does incorporate template letters as the motion requested at the last meeting. The tenants have asked us to ensure that the material on the website is communicated through rent-safe TO channels, such as the notice boards in buildings and more. And you had presentations on the chat box text messaging service last time, and we're also working with Toronto Building on the rent eviction assessment tool. Next slide, please. Development of the response to illegitimate evictions. So again, while these issues typically are provincial jurisdiction, the city does have interactions and programs and policies that intersect with landlord-tenancy issues. So we've got some ability to educate and intervene. Again, the report in front of us today allows us to, if subject to your approval, would allow us to use that fund to help tenants organize if they're experiencing an N13. So that's a hope that we'll be able to provide some advocacy and organizing resource dollars that way. Currently, what we're doing is working individually through city divisions to intervene through planning, building, or MLS processes. This is the one area, I'll admit, where we still have a bit of work to do. We're in the process of mapping our different authorities and processes and looking at intervention points in terms of information sharing. But one of the things we have in our work plan is to dive deeper into this from a staff perspective and hopefully through the Tenant Advisory Committee. Next slide, please. Sorry. So one of the pieces that we've been asked for in the housing plan, as well as this committee, is improved data collection analysis. I think across all governments, we aren't tracking and we don't know what the reality is. We're hearing that we're going to have evictions rising this heavy. We don't have data across divisions in terms of informal, illegitimate evictions and so on. Know what the landscape is. We also need to have good data to inform programs and policies and help us advocate with other orders of government. So throughout 2020, what we've been able to do is identify different program data that we have across the city. Through the work on the communications piece, we've been working with community agencies that we contract out to identify what information they collect, what type of resources they require to collect more data. If we're increasing data fields, we need them to collect around program data. We've had preliminary discussions with external think tanks, the CMHC, the Landlord Tenant Board, and also more recent discussions with some tenant-based groups that are doing their own data and updates. So we're in the process of early discussions with the province on an information sharing agreement. We're mapping internal data sources and opportunities for collaboration. And a big piece that we're looking to bring forward into 2021 is the data strategy piece that Councillor Bradford, that you'd recommended in the planning implementation report. Next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight a few other things. That the work that we've done here, I think we got the impression through some of the deputations last time that people thought maybe we weren't doing other things on rental housing. There's a lot of other work going on across the city in terms of building new. But with respect to preserving affordable housing, this year alone, we've invested $10 million to repair 1,900 rooms and rooming houses. We just in November at the Planning and Housing Committee had unanimously passed a consultation plan to legalize multi-tenant homes citywide. So there'll be consultations on that. And then with respect to retrofits, we've invested $800,000 in tower renewal programs and done some work with the Urban Land Institute. There's also been some acquisitions of rooming houses that were facilitated at the end of 2019. So they were acquired, I see Councillor Perks, they were acquired in Parkdale, Coda, and Park at the end of 2019. So that's some work that was done as well. Next slide, please. Data highlights, highlighting the gaps pretty much is what I'm going to say going forward. So the next slide, please. So we have had some preliminary back and forth on landlord and tenant board. Again, so the next few slides I'm going to go through are LTB data and city program data. And you'll see that there are some real gaps here in terms of what exists and where there's a lot of work to do. So we received this data from the LTB, and in the absence of an information sharing agreement, it's finding the right contact and asking for the information. So we're looking to streamline this. But what they've given us is the COVID stats from March 16th to the end of September for 2020, and comparing that to 2019. So we see in that period, despite an eviction moratorium, over 5,000 applications, of which over 3,300 were for non-payment of rent. About half of what you would expect in a normal year. And it's really important to note, and the LTB says this and we'll say it again, is that these are when landlords have issued an N4 notice and actually applied to the board. So that, but the LTB doesn't track notices. So we know, for example, we've heard from a lot of our stakeholder friends that landlords will download an N4, issue an N4, and someone thinks that they need to move out and assume that that's their eviction notice. So there's we don't know how many of these things are downloaded and how many people think they're moving out, but these are the ones that officially have gone from an N4 to the landlord applying to the LTB. So that's all we know. The next piece that we don't know is how many of those have actually resulted in an eviction. So we know that 5,000 have been applied for, but the LTB doesn't track whether or not they've actually followed through and evicted. So whether they received an eviction order, that's one thing, but the next piece is the Ministry of the Attorney General then like whether the landlord followed through to get the sheriff to go and implement that order. So there's no one collecting that data either. The LTB's indicated that as of October, they've started dealing with the backlog, and they plan to move into 21 to try and clear the backlog from before. So we will likely see things increasing during this period. So again, this data does not speak to any informal or illegitimate notices, and it's just simply applications. Next slide, please. Here's the city caveat. So the next slides that we're going to be presenting to you are the data from Rent Bank Epic, which is the Eviction and Preventions and Communities data, and the Housing Stabilization Fund. So the data we have here for you is simply program level data, applications that we've approved, and it doesn't necessarily represent what is happening out there. It's one little glimpse of the uptake in programs, but it shouldn't necessarily be used to tell us what the eviction trends are. So that's just our big caveat in the next 3 slides. Next slide, please. So this is the Rent Bank data. This is the loan program. So in 2020, there have been 824 loans approved to date. In the first quarter, we had on average 67 loans per month. And between the COVID period, about 89. So we've had a 32% increase between since COVID in the Rent Bank criteria. And this we know is more people have been receiving falling into arrears, and that the program criteria is expanded for increased eligibility. And you see that the loan amounts have gone up as well. Next slide, please. EPIC, the Eviction and Prevention and Communities Program, 280 evictions have been prevented to date in 2020. So compared to the first quarter, service levels have dropped. So on average, in the first quarter, we've had 23, about a 12% decrease with an average of 20 per month. And again, the reason we think that's the case is because of the eviction moratorium. Next slide, please. This is the Housing Stabilization Fund. This is the program administered through Toronto Employment and Social Services for Ontario Works and Ontario Disability and Support Program recipients. The HSF has several categories, but this is specific to people falling into arrears. So 980 households have accessed HSF for evictions in 2020. So in the first quarter, the use was high and on par with the usual year, and demand for it's dropped about 42% since COVID. But again, for all of our programs, we're expecting that the demand to increase now that the eviction moratorium is lifted and the LGB has started their cases. Next slide, please. This is a very detailed slide, but there have been several organizations, Wellesley Institute, Social Planning Toronto, and a consortium of researchers, including York U, putting out some research lately specific to Toronto on evictions and race-based data. Very important information for us to see that we're seeing some troubling trends around evictions in racialized communities across the city. Certain neighborhoods, according to the Wellesley Institute, have 4 times higher eviction rates than other neighborhoods. Poverty obviously is playing a role. Racialized communities, the Black population in Toronto having higher instances of eviction. Not surprisingly, subsidized housing has lower eviction filing rates. The SPT data is showing again that racialized communities have higher core housing need, unsuitable housing conditions, and so on. So as we move forward into a 2021 work plan, we're meeting with these organizations to get a better sense of their data. The place-based data is really interesting to help us figure out where to focus resources in communities and do community outreach. So with our communications campaigns and so on, this will help us reach out and target different neighborhoods and partner with the right agencies to get the reach we need. Next slide, please. So key actions for 2021. Next slide, please. And our last slide. So we're looking to expand the mandate of the Tenant Advisory Committee. Right now it's focused specifically on evictions and had a very narrow focus around the RTA and communications and so on. We've heard loud and clear from deputations that there's more work to do and broader preservation issues that we want to look at. So we're looking to expand the scope, but obviously the work on rent evictions and evictions is not done, so that'll be a constant theme. So looking with the approval of the committee to expand the mandate and create it as a permanent committee. The other one was to be re-examined after 6 months. So we'd see 2-year terms of people serving on the committee with a mix of experience. We'd like to develop joint work plans and have the work initiated. We've put in there some ideas, some work that we would like to do, but obviously with partnership, we'd be negotiating this with our new partners in the committee. But we have, for example, a direction for municipal small sites acquisition strategy. We think that would be really beneficial to have the input of a tenant advisory committee. They choose not to pursue it. We'd be pursuing it as staff anyway, bringing it back for consultations. We'd like to pursue a rent evictions policy. We're still in the process of developing our interim response, but we know that other jurisdictions such as BC and New York and other places have actual rent evictions policy, but we need to see what they're doing and see what's possible under the City of Toronto Act and the Ontario RTA. Data strategy, clearly we need to figure out a data strategy on this and put some resources to it. And the citywide communications campaign. Although a communications campaign is not the only thing to do, we have been advised by stakeholders that the bus shelter ads, targeted mail outs and things like that would be really helpful. The other thing that we've put it in the report for your consideration is that this tenant advisory committee, that's a permanent committee, would be consulted on any residential rental policies that relate to preservation. So, for example, the multi-tenant housing consultation that we're going to be undertaking likely go through this committee, depending on the timing, to check consultation materials, to get a gut check, as well as consult with this group before it goes back to committees to make sure that we're addressing any unintended consequences. We communicate or touch base on communications material. And then annually, the work plans would be included in the Housing TO action plans for transparency and accountability and reporting. That's my last slide. Happy to answer any questions. And I have a lot of my colleagues on side. And a lot of the data questions will be going to some of the other folks. So I'll have them queued up. I can see the smile on the screen so far.
Thank you so much, Sherry. We do have quite a number of speakers, present deputants here today, before we go to questions and any comments from the committee. So I'm going to start with, but thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. Very good. Great to have a milestone a year out from when we started our work, and recognizing that COVID has thrown a wrench into so many things. So thank you for persisting here. I'm going to start with the speakers list and let the first three know. Kemba Robinson from York West Acorn, followed by Marcia Stone from Weston Acorn, and Michelle Spencer. So those are the first three speakers. And I'm going to say, Kemba, are you here with us tonight?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, that's great. One thing about so far the technology is we can't see the great people that come to make deputations, and it's really unfortunate because I always like to see people that are taking the time to come to speak to us, but not yet. If this COVID persists, I'm sure eventually we will be able to see all of our deputants, but tonight we can't. But I'm going to suggest now that Kemba, please start your deputation. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the invitation and allowing us to speak here tonight. My name is Kemba Robinson, and I'm the chair of the West chapter of Acorn. And for the ones who may not know, Acorn is a tenant union made up of working class with our rights. Right now, our members are suffering during COVID, but they are struggling with unaffordable rents even before COVID. This is why we have been fighting against evictions and displacements and high rent for such a long time. And frankly, we at Acorn wonder why we have to have these many surrounding affordable housing, because as far as we know, affordable housing should be a right for everybody. We're here to speak about the city's work plan to protect affordable housing, especially about the city's plan on renovation. Evictions, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, is extremely dangerous. Evicting families in a time as this means they are now homeless, in a lot of cases homeless with kids, and that they do not have a place to isolate if by chance they are tested positive with the virus. In Bill 184, which was passed by our so-called compassionate premier, has made it easier for long-standing tenants to be evicted, especially now. We at Acorn have spoken to tenants who have been evicted. They have been living in their units between 10 and. Imagine how much below market rent that they're paying. And the landlords, especially the corporate landlords who want to see a huge profit, know this. And their strategy is to evict them under the guise of renovating the unit and raising the rent. 2 jobs just to pay the rent and another 1 or extra 2 jobs for everything else. This is not a way for families to live. Renovations are a big concern for Acorn members. Just this week, we had 2 meetings of tenants, one in Rexdale and one in South Scarborough, who are both being evicted by new owners of their buildings. And I should say, are trying to evict them because Acorn have been there fighting with them for their right to be in their unit. We think that the city should use whatever power it has to stop this from happening. And the city has a lot of power. And we're not sure why the city seems to be so free, willing to give landlords all the power. But the city has enough power to stop this from happening. The city should deny building permits to predatory landlords. And when a building is bought, the city should send out rent-safe inspectors or do some sort of in-person outreach to tell the tenants and let them know that they don't have to move. Landlords are taking advantage of these tenants' lack of knowledge and the fear among tenants to get them out, tidy up the building, and then jack up their rent. And keep in mind that it is not as if the landlords are using premium or luxurious supplies or materials to renovate these units. No, they're using the most basic and the cheapest materials they can find and increase the rent where tenants will need 2 jobs just to pay the rent. How is this fair? In Barnaby, Acorn run a huge victory. They call it a tenant assistance plan. If a landlord buys a building and tenants actually have to move for the renovation, we know this often is the case for tenants to move out, then the landlord is responsible for finding people a new place close by. Then if the new place is more expensive than their current home, the landlord is responsible for topping up the rent and paying the moving costs. Then when the work is done, the tenant gets at the same rate of rent they were paying before renovations were done. This was a huge win for Acorn. This is done in Barnaby. This can be done also in Toronto. Toronto is always asking for a model where XYZ has happened and it's progressive and it's beneficial. It happened right here in Canada, in Barnaby. So it's possible for it to be done in Toronto also. We also need to see the city track tenants who do move out during COVID renovations to make sure they're moving back in. The city could create a landlord and tenant registry to make sure that the right to return back to their home is. Now we hear from a lot of.
I'm just going to ask Kemba, can you start wrapping up, please? You're just at your 5 minutes
Sure.
now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's going to take a lot of work. Acorn members will be fighting, organizing, and pushing to make this happen. We'll do actions on renovictions. We'll organize tenants to put pressure on our politicians to make sure tenants' rights for affordable housing is protected.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask councillors if there's any questions for Kemba. No? Councillor Bradford? No? Do you have a question? Kemba, where you said you were in Rexdale with Renoviction?
Yes.
What address was that?
Give me one moment, please. Our Acorn member was Patricia Edwards. And I'm trying to find it. Sorry, I didn't think you'd be asking me that. Yeah. But possible for me an email?
Yes, why don't you email? And the same, okay, there's a building you said in South Scarborough that you were also had members and they were being renovicted from that building?
Yes.
Could you also let me know what address that is to, please?
I can do that for sure.
And were both of those successful renovictions? Or are they in process?
In process, not yet. Actually, the Acorn member, her name is Patricia, and it's 25 Leduc Drive.
25 what?
Leduc, Leduc Drive.
That's in Rexdale.
Yes, and the one in Scarborough I can get back to you with.
Thank
I can send you an email.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your work on this. It's relentless, and so are you. Okay, thank you. Next up is Marcia Stone from Weston Acorn. Marcia, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, and thank you, everybody, for your time today. My name is Marcia Stone, and I'm co-chair of Western Acorn. Acorn is a tenant union made up of working-class tenants in Toronto. We're 40,000 strong, focused in 6 neighborhood chapters of Weston, East York, St. Jamestown, Scarborough, Etobicoke, and York West. These are the neighborhoods where the last affordable housing in the city is focused. And it's where affordable housing is under attack. We organize to build power and have our voices heard on issues like affordable childcare, healthy homes, affordable housing, and the digital divide. And we fight to protect our communities and our neighbors. I'm here today to talk about housing, about protecting affordable housing in my neighborhood and all across the city. The subcommittee has come up with a great work plan for next year. Acorn is really happy with what we're seeing tonight. But what we don't like is continually getting calls about the same landlords with the same issues from different tenants. Acorn is talking to tenants who say that they have called the city 2 or 3 times and that nothing is being done. So we're hoping that this work plan will deal with some of that. We'll definitely be keeping the pressure up on all of you. There is mention of RaceBased in this work plan, that it will be used to distribute tenant rights information to people, or that the website will be updated to provide more information about our rights to us. Acorn is calling for RaceBased to be strengthened. We need to see systematic rules for property standard officers that they all follow, with transparency about what they'll do and clear penalties for landlords that are ignoring property standard issues. It's easier to protect affordable housing than it is to build up new affordable housing. You also talk about the data collection. How about collecting data to find out which apartments in Toronto are the most affordable? Because those are the buildings where tenants are probably getting harassed the most by their landlords. And that's where you need to target enforcement and protect the tenants. When landlords register for RentSafe, they should also be required to provide information on the level of rent being collected so that the city can find these buildings and protect them. And RentSafe or the city in general should be collecting the name and contact information of the owners of the buildings, not just the property manager. Sometimes we do an action at a building and all we have is information for the property manager. And guess what? We meet with them and they say, I can't fix this issue. It's not up to me. It's up to the owner. The city has access to property rolls. You should be providing the name and contact information of the owner of every building that's registered with RentSafe. This is important data that the tenants need to know and can use to protect their homes and protect the affordable housing in their community. Here's the thing. I truly believe this. Your postal code should not determine your quality of life or the quality of service you receive. We're all citizens in this city. We all deserve a healthy space to live and raise our families. Next year, we look forward to seeing the best tenant protection policies in all of Canada right here in Toronto. Acorn members have won some major victories protecting affordable housing in Hamilton, Burnaby, and other parts of BC, not to mention Toronto. It's up to you to implement them and make them as strong as possible. Because at the end of the day, when you go home to your nice home, remember, there are people in your community who you represent who don't have that same luxury and look to you to use your power to protect them. And with that, I thank you.
Thanks very much, Marcia. Are there any questions for Marcia? Nope. thank you very much for being
Thank
with
you.
us. Calling next.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you, but we can't see you, but nice you were here. Thank you. Michelle Spencer, and then followed by Aaron Kaplan and Philip Sigmund. So Michelle, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Good. You have
So-
5 minutes. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michelle Spencer, and I am a member of Scarborough Acorn. As you've heard, Acorn is a membership organization of low and moderate income people, and we're fighting for change. So we work on issues like affordable childcare, healthy homes, the digital divide, and predatory lending. But one of our biggest issues is protecting our homes. So we're glad that the city has a plan to work to protect affordable housing. We like a lot of what we see. We want to demand just a bit better and highlight some key issues. So just a couple weeks ago, we held a tenant speak out at Kingston and Midland Avenue. So many tenants had maintenance issues, and I'm talking about vermin issues. One tenant found 6 mice under her stove on a trap. You had them dealing with bed bugs, roaches. Tenants of one building in particular have been unable to use their front entrance for months due to construction. And it's causing problems for those with accessibility issues, and even something as simple as accepting a delivery has become extremely problematic. When they approach their property management, they're told they can move if they're not happy. These tenants deserve healthy, safe, and affordable living conditions. All of us do. Many of these tenants do not know how to get their issues addressed. They've called the city, they've called the landlord, and nothing has happened. So it is important that you communicate better with tenants about what their rights are. And your words need to be backed up with actions. One of those actions is by making rent safe, as tough and as tight as possible. One of the buildings in particular, 2260 Kingston Road, was recently bought and has a new owner, Starlight. I am sure that you are all aware Starlight is a huge multinational billion-dollar real estate investment trust, making thousands of dollars a minute in profit. But they pay minimal taxes, and they destroy affordable housing by not doing repairs, applying for AGIs, and doing all that they can to maximize profit. Their mantra seems to be profit over people. Acorn thinks the city should create a bold plan that will actually help nonprofits by buying up small buildings that are in financial distress. This would be a key way to protect affordable housing. Nonprofits, by definition, would not be focused on maximizing profit. They would actually protect the right to housing and perhaps open up other more affordable housing options like co-op housing, for example. If the city does not take this step, we are to see more and more buildings being gobbled up by huge corporate landlords that don't care about their tenants. And it's happening all over Scarborough, and it's extremely worrying. For example, I believe it's a 33-unit building in Scarborough was just purchased by Altry, and the residents are potentially being evicted. And this cannot be allowed to happen. Had the city had a fund in place, buildings such as this could have been purchased by a nonprofit, and these residents could remain in their homes. There are options to provide funding to support nonprofits, things like a vacant unit tax, a luxury tax on the property tax of mansions, and real financial penalties for landlords that do not keep up with repairs. With that being said, I do want to thank you for this opportunity. Acorn will be making sure that you follow up on these measures. And since about half of Toronto's population are renters, I'm sure that we all hope that you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and appreciate that. Appreciate all the work of Acorn. From a action on Woodfield Road, we certainly got things moving there under Rent Safe, and all of those tenants are getting a major upgrade to the building. So a lot of the great work that you're doing, and appreciate this information on Evictions. I just saw the letter that you sent out about 25 Leduc and Torbolton Road, and it's quite concerning, the Rexdale Evictions. So I'm sure we're here to help you, Acorn, in whatever way we can through this committee, and the tenants, of course, of 25 Leduc. Thank you. Aaron Kaplan, you're here from the Toronto St. Paul's Tenants Association Network. We're really happy you're here tonight and to address this, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're very pleased to note the creation of the Tenant Advisory Committee. We wish to add a note of caution. The Tenant Advisory Committee cannot be treated as a check mark for submissions going forward to the Planning and Housing Committee. The Tenant Advisory Committee must be understood and treated as a partnership entity where draft concepts are presented for fulsome discussion. The Tenant Advisory Committee must be embedded as a city process where there is a sharing of draft documents, not documents that have been approved for release to the public. We need a clear commitment from all city divisions developing renter-related services, policies, programs, or consultations will, without exception, consult with the Tenant Advisory Committee. We are aware that not all the items included in the past agendas of the Planning and Housing Committee would have been relevant for consideration by the Tenant Advisory Committee. We are proposing that city staff should be directed to review the past year's agenda items for Planning and Housing Committee and develop a conceptual framework for the types of items that will be directed and appropriate to go to the Tenant Advisory Committee. The conceptual framework will provide staff with a clear directive of which types of items need to be presented to the Tenant Advisory Committee for consultation. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Erin? No? Thank you very much, Erin, for taking some time to be with us tonight. Next deputant is Philip Zigman, and after Philip, it's Helen Chillis, and after Helen, Jonathan Robart. Thank you. Just a second while I get your clock going there. Philip, are you with us?
Yeah, could you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please start. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a few things to say about rent evictions, but on this first day of lockdown number 2, I just want to start by saying that it's shameful that the city has not banned evictions during the pandemic and for non-payment of rent during COVID. I mean, there's nothing more to say, but city inaction here is just inexcusable, and asking the province to act is simply not enough. But on to rent evictions. So I suspect that much of what I'll say also applies to own use evictions, but I'm a bit less confident here, so I'll focus my points on rent evictions. And basically, the main point is that if the city hopes to come up with measures that actually address rent evictions, then I think it needs to have an adequate understanding of the phenomenon. And here, I think there are 2 key things. First is that all or most N13s and informal rent evictions are in bad faith, and the primary goal is displacing longstanding tenants and exploiting vacancy decontrol. Conducting renovations is at most a secondary goal. So even if landlords get their permits, issue N13s, and file an L2, in other words, if landlords follow all the rules, that does not mean that they are acting in good faith or that their primary goal is anything but displacement. Second, while it's true that most rent evictions are informal, involve landlords issuing N13s but not filing with the LTB, or are cases where no building permits have been obtained, even when landlords do things by the book, the outcome is typically displacement if all tenants do is assert their rights. So what landlords are doing is legal, and once tenants are out, it's incredibly unlikely they're going to return, either because landlords simply violate their right to return, to which tenants really have no recourse, or simply because what is being demanded of tenants to assert this right is, quite frankly, absurd. So the current rules basically facilitate displacement. This understanding of rent evictions and what's actually happening in the city is based on conversations with many tenants, legal clinic lawyers, organizers, and others who have extensive experience with rent evictions. As far as I understand, the city has no data on rent evictions or evidence that contradicts this picture, so it's hard to justify taking a different perspective here. Now, given these 2 things, if the city wants to protect its affordable rental housing and stop rent evictions, it needs to focus on identifying and stopping all rent evictions, not on ensuring that the rules are followed. Focusing on illegal evictions or trying to distinguish between legitimate and illegitimate cases isn't going to be helpful. What the city needs to do is prevent rent evictions full stop. And it needs to do something other than simply encourage tenants to assert their rights, because even when the rules are followed and tenants assert their rights, the result is going to be displacement. The city currently spends millions of dollars a year to subsidize the construction of a small number of affordable rental units while doing almost nothing to prevent the much more rapid loss of its existing affordable housing. Fortunately, the city does have lots of power and resources at its disposal, and there's lots that it could do, but it needs to start acting now because rent evictions continue during COVID, and at a certain point, if the committee waits long enough, there's not going to be any more affordable housing left to preserve. So the draft work plan for 2021, I think, is a good start towards taking some actions to address rent evictions. I have a few comments, brief comments to make about what I think the city could do, which relate mostly to numbers 2, 3, and 6. So those relating to communication and policy. And some of these echo things that other speakers have already mentioned. First, the very least the city can do, I think, is launch a strong information campaign informing tenants of the rent eviction threat, notifying them of their rights, and encouraging them not to move out. I think it also needs to encourage tenants to reach out to their neighbors and community or tenant organizations who have experience fighting rent evictions and can support their organizing outside of the LTB process. We've seen tenants successfully fight rent evictions outside of this process. In addition to recently sold buildings and buildings owned by landlords who have rent evicted people before, the city could target its outreach in areas and at building types that meet the profile for rent evictions, and it's a profile that's pretty widely known. Second, there would seem to be lots the city can do given their role in issuing building permits. Why not resist issuing permits when tenants report the landlord to be actively pressuring them to move out? Why not refuse issuing permits to landlords who have rent evicted people before? Third, the city is also supposed to enforce building standards. Right now, the city basically depends on tenants facing rent eviction to protect the city's own affordable rental housing by not moving out. It's also widely known that landlords trying to rent evict people often make their homes as uncomfortable as it can be, so that the tenants are going to move out. So a way that the city can help out tenants who are currently working to preserve its affordable housing would be to actively enforce property standards to make it easier for tenants to stay in their homes and fight rent eviction.
Can you wrap up shortly, please, Philip? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I guess the work plan also mentions bylaws in BC's, which I think refers to, or at least in part refers to New Westminster's bylaw regarding rent evictions. I think the city has to move past just looking at fines. The landlords who rent evicted people at 795 College got fined plenty, and they haven't been deterred. They've continued to rent evict people. So something that actually takes away licenses from landlords or developers may be a penalty that's stiff enough. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Philip? No? Philip, I just wanted to ask you, the city, your understanding is the city itself can ban evictions?
My understanding is that there's a legal gray area in times of, emergency health directives, and that the city has not made an attempt to ban evictions during the COVID pandemic.
And your belief is that we have that ability to do that legally?
My belief is that there's debate amongst legal experts whether or not the city has that right, and other cities seem to have put in stronger restrictions and put in measures that the province hasn't passed. And I know that city councillors and people at the city insist that they don't have the power to ban evictions. They haven't made an effort to do so and test whether they have the ability to do so.
Could you guide me on which cities have done that so we could check into that, please?
So I haven't said that cities have banned eviction. I said that cities have put certain regions and cities in Ontario, as far as I understand, have sometimes put in stricter measures in place for public safety than those that have been those that have been kind of mandated by the province.
And can you tell me which ones, which cities, please?
I could look into that and send that to you, yes.
Oh, that would be helpful in what they've done. Could you send that as quickly as you can? That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Next speaker is Helen Chillis, followed by Jonathan Robert.
Hello.
Hi. You have 5 minutes,
there.
Helen. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Helen Chillis, and I'm with the 1501 Woodbine Tenants Group, and I represent approximately 1,000 neighbors. in fact, I'm also on the current public advisory group on affordable housing with the city, and I just wanted to firstly thank everyone on our committee. It certainly was a lot of work, and most especially our co-chairs, Ben, Malua, and Sherry. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Now, I'm here to speak about the topic of the preservation of affordable rental housing. Affordability, again, and I know that this committee, amongst many city officials and the public at large, the term affordability is relative to one's financial circumstances. So perhaps that could be something to look at. Seeing that since one half of the city of Toronto rents, we all need affordability. But again, that is relative. That's something perhaps that needs to be explored. One area that I noticed that keeps being avoided is the fact that in older apartment buildings, we still continue to pay exuberant property tax rates. One way the city can make living a little bit more affordable for many, many tenants, thousands of tenants across the city, is to bring parity to property tax rates and to eliminate the older apartment tax rate, which is basically at the same equivalent level as a commercial property taxes. As far as the new tenant advisory committee that is going to be established, I applaud the work that our current committee has done, but also look very forward to the upcoming work the committee will be conducting. One important factor that needs to be taken into place is that the new committee, it's imperative, as Erin Kaplan had so eloquently spoken on, is that the committee itself needs to be at the same level as in leadership terms when it comes to not just being an advisory committee and being consulted upon, but to play a role that will make permanent, positive, lasting changes. So I do thank you for your time this evening, and thank you again for giving me a few moments again today.
Thank you very much, Helen, for joining us tonight and your ongoing work at your tenants group and across the city. Jonathan Robart, followed by Benjamin Pulia. Jonathan, are you with us? Yes?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here on behalf of the Right to Housing in Toronto. We're a network of organizations and individuals working to support the implementation of the human right to housing by the City of Toronto. I want to begin by noting that the city's work on supporting tenants and preserving affordable rental housing continues to move in the right direction. We really appreciate all of your hard work, especially during these unpredictable times. And we would like to share some recommendations with you tonight as you move forward with the agenda items. So on the Tenant Advisory Committee, a human rights-based approach to housing policy must include a commitment to rights-based decision-making, participation, and leadership. This approach includes meaningful engagement with individuals and communities with lived experience, along with advocates and organizations with technical human rights and right to housing expertise. So we're very pleased to see that the proposed composition of this committee requires representation from persons with lived experience, and we're also very pleased to see that this committee will include right to housing advocates. But we do note that the third recommendation under consideration tonight includes a direction for all city divisions undertaking housing-related work to consult with the Tenant Advisory Committee. And we also note that the report being considered this evening does use the word consult when describing opportunities for input and participation from committee members. So it's our position that in order to fully align with a rights-based approach to housing, These opportunities must go beyond mere consultation and instead ensure the meaningful and direct engagement with all members of the committee, and especially those with lived experience. So we encourage the subcommittee to ensure the creation of a new tenant advisory committee does include a mandate for opportunities for meaningful engagement, participation, and leadership. With regards to the 2020 work plan and the development of this work plan, we note that requiring intergovernmental cooperation and coordination, governance, and resources is another key principle of a rights-based approach to housing policy. And the recently released framework by the city on multi-tenant housing is an excellent example of how intergovernmental cooperation and coordination can be used to develop housing policy, and housing policy especially that has a deep grounding in human rights-based principles. So we're very pleased to see that the same interdivisional model and approach is being considered with regards to the development of the work plans in question tonight. And we're also pleased to see that this approach recognizes the importance of engagement and cooperation, and especially with members of the Tenant Advisory Committee. So we do hope that further development and implementation of the work plan can act as another example of how increased collaboration and cooperation can result in housing policy that aligns with the city's commitment to the progressive realization of the right to housing. And one other note about the work plan, the collection and analysis of high quality data can help determine the impacts of housing policies and programs, and especially the impact on housing rights of priority populations and equity seeking groups. More data is needed on evictions, and by evictions, I certainly mean legal, informal, and illegal evictions, loss of affordability, and the state of affordable housing throughout the city. We desperately need this data, and I echo a lot of the other points made by the other speakers this evening. We do commend the work plan's proposed development of a data strategy to help support eviction prevention and affordable rental housing protection work, and we hope that data strategy is robust. So my last point this evening is about the role of the Housing Commissioner. So in order to ensure that engagement with the Tenant Advisory Committee and the increased coordination between city staff is successful, I just want to note that the engagement with this committee and all the work being done among city staff will undoubtedly result in the identification and reporting of systemic housing-related issues. And as such, there will be a need for an independent housing commissioner role in office to ensure the city will be positioned to receive and adequately address the systemic issues that come to the city's attention. And as such, we strongly encourage the city to continue to move forward on its commitment to establish an independent housing commissioner role in office. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And for that, any questions for Jonathan? No? Thank you. Benjamin, are you up with us? And next after Benjamin, Annie Hodgins from Sarah. Thank you, Benjamin. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to make a few comments and recommendations related to the potential of a tenant advisory committee to inform decision-making at the city. First, the good. I came to a hard-won awareness of the issues that face tenants through several evictions spread across 15-odd years of living in Toronto. Until the latest round of N13s handed out to each and every resident in my building who isn't paying market rent, I couldn't have told you what sort of documents were filed against me in any of my previous encounters with eviction. In the mid-2000s, I was forced to move from 48 Able Street, rented to me and my then partner for $10.50 a month. This was the second apartment I called home in Toronto, and what I experienced was what we've come to know as demoviction, the act of removing people from their houses in order to demolish them. A few years later, I was forced out of 254 Augusta, a 2-bedroom apartment for $700 a month, when the landlord's lawyer claimed personal use. But I'm guessing what I ended up signing was an N11. Another eviction from 241 Dovercourt Road, a 3-bedroom apartment for $900 a month, came in the early 2010s. I bothered to show up to the hearing for this, but ended up agreeing to leave through mediation, seeing as I had no representation and was completely out of my depth. I include this partial autobiography of displacement to not only situate myself, but also note that the city is not encountering some new swell. but has only perhaps now taken note of a wave that is finally so huge that it cannot be ignored. But I was talking about the good, and the good is that while my knowledge of eviction and displacement and the dysfunction related to housing that exists across all levels of government has been slow going and hard won, many of my fellow members of the advisory group approach tenancy issues and tenant rights as experienced professionals and seasoned advocates. The city managed to assemble an excellent team of lawyers, activists, organizers, and persons with lived experience. Looking back at my personal history and the history of the organizations that the city is so fortunate to be able to assemble and draw upon, I realized that had I better understood my rights and had a clearer path to accessing support, I may have saved one or two of my tenancies. So, if it is willing, the city is well positioned to leverage the knowledge possessed by my fellow advisory group members. And this takes me from what was clearly a win for the city, identifying experts and putting them in a room together, to the central challenge that the city faces regarding a tenant advisory committee, namely, what will you do with us? I will conclude by breaking down the question of what will you do with us into two recommendations for this subcommittee. First, I am sure the members of this committee are aware that housing is a complex issue that touches and is touched by multiple levels of jurisdiction and several departments across the city. For any tenant advisory committee to adequately carry out the task of informing and guiding the city on issues facing almost one half of its population, the advisory committee must enjoy a broad mandate, one which views tenant rights and housing issues holistically. To be successful, the tenant advisory committee should be tasked with tackling tenant and rental issues wherever they arise. For example, Councillor Bailau's July 28, 2020 member motion 23.25, voted up by all members of this subcommittee on converting short-term rentals to long-term affordable housing, would have surely benefited from comments and markup by a tenant advisory committee, either before it made its way to the council floor or afterwards. My comments on the abysmal rent safe TO program provided to the Planning and Housing Committee last week serve as another example of where leveraging the experiences of the people who actually use the services that the city offers would pay dividends. Finally, in my capacity as co-chair of the advisory group, I conducted debriefs with willing participants. The overarching challenge I heard was regarding lines of communication and the effect the work we were doing was having. It was unclear how the input being given was being received by the city and whether our suggestions were received and digested by those in power to use them. For an advisory committee to succeed and retain the consistent input of otherwise overworked volunteers, the city, in my view, needs to offer a clear path, one that illuminates how the committee goes from its mandate to its input and then to results that meaningfully leverage that input. There are many people who are engaged in a struggle to make the city a fairer place for all of its stakeholders, and housing and tenant rights are a central locus in that struggle. The city and this subcommittee are to be thanked for the work of assembling a tenant advisory committee. Now, will you use it? Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin, and thank you for your work on the tenant advisory committee. It's much appreciated. I'll just ask the other councillors if they have any questions of you tonight. No? Thank you very much for being with us. I'm going to call Annie Hodgins from CIRA, please. Thank you.
Hi there. Hi there, my name is Annie Hodgins, and I'm here presenting on behalf of the Center for Equality, Rights and Accommodation. We're a nonprofit dedicated to making sure everyone has an adequate, accessible, and affordable place to call home. And we do that through advancing the right to housing, through advocacy, education, and empowerment. So thanks for having me tonight. So I speak on behalf of CIRA. We're pleased to see that the city's work on supporting tenants and preserving affordable rental housing continues to move in the right direction. We're encouraged by the efforts made
I'm just going to stop you, Annie. It's very hard to hear you. And so I think if you were to speak a little slower.
Sure. I'm just going to see if maybe I switch.
Okay, I'll give you a minute there.
Is it easier to hear me now?
Yes, now we can really hear you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so my apologies. I was just introducing myself. So CIRA is pleased to see that the city's work on supporting tenants and preserving affordable rental housing continues to move in the right direction. We're encouraged by the efforts made so far, which couldn't come at a more crucial time for tenants, as I think a lot of people tonight have highlighted. In particular, we're really happy to see the city engage directly with tenants and tenant advocates, and we support the proposal to create a new tenant advisory committee and develop a work plan to address protecting affordable rental housing. So tonight, I'd like to share some of our recommendations with you as you move forward on both of these initiatives. So regarding the Tenant Advisory Committee, we believe that a human rights-based approach to housing policy should include a commitment to rights-based decision-making, participation, and leadership. Under this approach, the design, implementation, and monitoring of housing policy should include meaningful engagement with people, communities, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders who are affected by inadequate housing and homelessness. Because of that, we definitely support the creation of a tenant advisory committee with an expanded mandate that aligns with a rights-based approach. The establishment of the committee would be another critical step towards the progressive realization of the right to adequate housing, in our opinion. We've been pleased to participate as a member of the current advisory committee on the protection of affordable rental housing and as a member of the external advisory committee for the development of the housing TO action plan, both of which we think were strong examples of meaningful engagement. So we're pleased to see that committee membership would be including right to housing advocates, and we encourage the subcommittee to approve the creation of the Tenant Advisory Committee with an expanded mandate based on meaningful engagement, participation, and leadership. So on the topic of the development of the 2021 work plan, intergovernmental cooperation and coordinated governance is another key component of a rights-based approach to housing policy. Last week, the city released a framework for the regulation of multi-tenant houses that relied heavily on intergovernmental cooperation and recommended an interdivisional model going forward. We felt this was a positive step towards the realization of the right to housing in Toronto. It was the first City of Toronto policy since the adoption of the Housing TO Action Plan that was developed using a human rights lens, and the final product is grounded in human rights-based principles and action. So we thought that was great. As noted in our written submission to the Planning and Housing Committee about it, we're optimistic about the framework's alignment of policy with the city's commitment to realizing the right to housing. And we hope it'll act as a precedent for future policy. We're equally optimistic about the recommended interdivisional model under which the 2021 future work plans will be developed. We encourage any opportunity for increased collaboration among city divisions and with those directly affected by inadequate and unaffordable housing. We hope the work plan process will act as another example of how increased collaboration can result in housing policy grounded in a human rights-based principles and action. And finally, I'd just like to speak about the importance of a housing commissioner's office. Rights-based approaches to housing policy, like the ones I've just outlined, will increasingly rely on interdivisional and interagency collaboration, as well as the participation of advocates and tenants with lived experience. And these groups will likely raise systemic issues. And we want to highlight that the establishment of an independent housing commissioner's office is key to the city's ability to address the systemic issues that tenants and advocates see every day and will raise. So a commissioner's office would allow the city to hear about systemic issues and then ensure that its work meaningfully addresses those issues. So as such, we want to also strongly encourage the city to continue to move forward on its commitment to establishing an independent housing commissioner's office. And that was sort of the final comment that I wanted to make tonight. And thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Annie, for being with us. Next deputant is Patricia Edwards from Toronto Acorn, and last deputant Benny Van Velsen. So Patricia, are you with us tonight?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you have
can you hear me?
5 minutes. Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Excellent. All right, just a second here. Okay. My name is Patricia Edwards. I'm from Toronto Acorn. I'm presently the one that you heard about with Sorry about this.
It's okay. Are you from Leduc? Are you from 25 Leduc?
Yes, I'm from 25 Leduc.
Okay.
And sorry about this. So hold on a second. Yeah, my name is Patricia Edwards. Oh, where did it go?
It's okay, Patricia. I'll hold your time for you while you get yourself organized there. Don't worry.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Yep. I know, moving all those papers around, trying to figure out where your speech is.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, you've got all that evictions on top of it, so we understand you're a little frazzled.
I'm
It's
sorry
okay.
about this.
Yep. Take a minute and get yourself pulled together. No problem.
Yeah, I had it up here and now I lost it. Sorry about this. I'm all shaking and everything.
I know. Don't worry. You're fine.
All right. Thank you.
You're good. While you're looking for that, I'll just let the other members of the committee know that the clerk has sent you a little couple of motions that one I'm going to place here. Did you get that? Advanced circulated on CMP. Sorry, advanced circulated CMP. Yes. Councillor Perks is nodding.
I had a couple of things. Oh, I'm so nervous now. I didn't expect to be called up so soon.
Would you like Benny to go next, and then you'd go after him,
yes,
Patricia?
Please. Yes, please, and I'll find my
Sure.
please.
Why don't we do that?
Yes.
I'll just
Thank
check
you.
and see if Benny's ready. Benny, are you with us?
Oh
Okay.
no.
Okay, you're going to take Patricia off, and we'll put Ben on. He's on, but which? Benny, if you're listening, you need to connect your audio, please. Welcome to WebEx and our virtual meetings. They're sometimes not that easy. I know you're seeing all these crazy things on the clock. There we go. Just checking with you one more time, Benny. Not able to get him? No. And you've unmuted him, but he's not connected. Okay. There's no audio connection. Okay, so we have a problem there. I'll just go back. I should see if anybody else wants a couple more minutes. That was a deputant. We have another minute while we're letting Patricia get herself organized, because anybody that's been in that circumstance where after how many years you're just out of the blue get a notice that getting evicted, it's pretty upsetting. I'm just going to check with you, Patricia. Is Patricia still there? Are you there? Did you get everything pulled together now? Do you think you're...
No, I can't seem to find it.
You can't find it?
Email, yeah, and now it's like...
Okay, why don't you just tell us what's happening at Leduc? And that, because you're right in real time.
Well, at Leduc right now, 3 weeks... Okay, no problem. 3 weeks ago, we received an N9 and an N13, at which point I ran around because I'm a part of ACORN and I'm a member. So I basically ran around and told everybody, don't sign anything, don't do anything, let's get in touch with ACORN and go from there. So basically, from what I understand, that he's looking to evict us to do evictions. So he hasn't applied for any of the for the permits to do it, because it's easier to get when everybody's out. When there's tenants there, it's harder to get those permits because there's existing tenants. I haven't been able to get in touch with the LTD to get any information from them. Their phone is always busy. So as for trying to understand where, besides what I know from ACORN. So what my worry is that I'll be out on the by March 31st, having to live in the field next to my place that I'm living now. I don't know how he has offered on the N9 a $5,000 payout paid after you move. Now, in order to do that, I need money to move. So that's kind of contradicting within itself. I think I'm worth a lot more than $5,000, and from what I understand, the regulation is that I can stay in my home. He would have to put me in another place, and like Acorn says, possibly top up the rent and then have me come back. But none of that's been offered. He doesn't talk to anybody. We all have to deal with his management for the place, and that's Raul. And Raul doesn't, oh, no, this is it, that's it, and we're not going to deal with you as a group, we want to deal with you individually. And so there's no communication between the management that is running the townhouses that we live in. Like I said, some of the people have lived here for 40 years. I've lived here for 5. And of course, then they're on grandpa rent. So they're after the grandpa rent. They're after making sure that, you know, and that's what Michael Klein, Clein, who's the person who bought this complex, because he even says, oh, I go around looking for all the ones who are paying low rents and I buy them out, and then of course renovate, demolish, who knows what they're doing. There's no talk, there's no conversation, and we have like 20 people here at this complex, and we're all just like, what's going on? And no one wants to talk to us for some reason. So we're at this point where we'll probably do another action again to get more coverage. And people are afraid what to do. I haven't even paid my rent this month because I want the LTV to come to me, because I'm having a difficult time coming to them. I have the rent, so it's not like it's not paid, just it's not given to him. So, and you know, some people have continued to pay the rent, which is their choice. You can't, you know, order anybody not to do something. But my family's concerned that if we don't win this and we're thrown out in the street, this is a 2-bedroom townhouse. The most I can squeeze into is, because there's 3 of us living here, paying $500 rent because we maybe make $1,800 in total per month on a salary. So that's affordable for us, $500-600 rent. We'll split it up and we're living fine here. But I've been looking at $1,200 rooms. And you expect me to take a 2-bedroom townhouse and put it into a room? And I have cats. I have 3 cats, beautiful cats. I have one that's almost 16 years old. What do you want me to do with the cat? You know, where am I supposed to go if I'm paying $1,500 with rent and electricity and gas, and move into a $1,200 room with all my stuff? That's highly impossible. It's highly, I can't imagine. I can't see, you know, like, and it's very frustrating. The anxiety is for everybody. I'm diabetic, so my sugar level's been on quite of a high the last couple of weeks. And, you know, this is dangerous to people's health. We're in a pandemic where, you know, everything's shutting down. As to what point can I move anywhere except into the field right next to where I'm living? Big, nice, open hydro field. So maybe I'll get some of those green plastic, you know, bed huts that they're giving out to the homeless people, because that's where I'm feeling. The first time I've ever felt this way in 52 years of my life. You know, and I've moved several times, lots of times with my family. And this is the first time I've ever been confronted or inflicted by such a situation that just endangers the lives of many. I mean, you know, if you want to talk about healthy city, this is not the way to go, you know. So
Thank you.
Like I said, we're fighting and as hard as we can, and thank you for listening to me. I know the other members had mentioned me, 25 the Duke. So all we can ask is that the city listens and understands that, doing this to people is cruel and evil, and it has to stop. It has to stop today, like now, like this minute on this
Thank you, Patricia.
discussion. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you very much. Sorry
Thank you.
about that.
There might be a question. No, that was very good. We appreciate you laying that out. This is one of the reasons,
Yes.
it's the reason why we put this committee together. Are there any questions for Patricia? No, Patricia, I wondered if you've been able to work with the Rexdale Legal Clinic, which is up in Rexdale, if you're a member.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't. No. And that's what my purpose, my worry is the legal, and it's coming up with the money to file.
Well, the
report,
Rexdale
too.
Legal Clinic assists low-income tenants, so that
right.
And
would be something to bring to
definitely,
them. Yeah.
definitely need to do that. And I'm just wondering if, I'm going to ask our staff, but I'm going to ask if you were able to go on the website that's been developed, and if there were any templates there or any sample letters there that were helpful to you in thinking about what steps to take in this
Okay, and that would
renovation.
be what website? Which website would that be?
The cities, the one that we saw earlier.
Okay, yes. No, I haven't gone on, but I will go on and check that out. I'm pretty sure Acorn's probably investigated the website.
Yeah, I'll ask about that when we get to staff questions. That's great. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you very much.
And then I'm just going to see if Benny has managed to get his audio connected. Yes,
Hello?
Benny is connected. Yay, Benny. Okay.
Oh, do you hear me?
I do.
You can hear me? Oh.
Oh, I can
Well,
hear you,
fine.
Benny. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
I'm going to give you 5 minutes now. Start off. Off you go. Thank you.
Okay. I'm all in a kerfuffle now. I don't belong in any official way to any organization, though I'm associated with LAMP, which is out in South Etobicoke, and the Lakeshore Area Housing Advocacy and Action Group. And one thing that's going on, excuse me, around here, like it is around everywhere, is this renovation business. And I've had a lot of conversations with my landlord about his plans to do something similar. And to his credit, he's trying to give me plenty of notice. But I realized in all the conversations that nothing really is going to change much in that area of landlords doing that until we address why landlords are doing that. And a part of the reason, as it was explained to me, was that, his property taxes have gone through the roof, and he's losing money on this building, essentially. So he's going to, I don't know how the finances work, but he's taking out some kind of money based on his mortgage or whatever to hopefully renovate and kick us out in the meantime and double the rent. Certainly part of it is motivated by the potential financial benefit to that. But he really raised for me, he made me aware that there's two sides to the story. And even with the developer, they're not in it to be altruistic. They're not there to provide housing because they think it's a good idea for people. They're there to make money. And, unless they're stopped from treating housing like a commodity, I think we need to somehow dilute the concept that housing is a commodity and begin to impart and strengthen the idea that housing, if you're building housing, it's actually a social service and a huge responsibility to the people that you're renting to and the community, because housing is, as we all know, kind of a human right. So those are some of the thoughts that I had. And I thought, maybe, one thing that could happen is that perhaps funding needs to happen to help landlords such as my landlord, like the mom and pop landlords. I cannot place them in the same category as the big developers. Like they're just two absolutely different animals. And, I'd like to see a way that there's like a win-win situation between the smaller landlords and the tenants that they house. And, I'd like to see a win-win there. The big developers, I don't, in honesty, really care too much about them. But, they are in it and providing housing, however they're building it. But, there is that. I was just sort of looking at my notes here. Sorry, I was so busy trying to find a way to connect. I kind of lost track of where I was. I wanted to go back to who was it that was saying they were referring to counterfeit N4s. And I thought, well, like maybe it's not possible, but it seemed like a simple way of safeguarding that would be to, you see a lot of things online that have like copy written across it or sample written across it, so that a landlord wouldn't be able to just print it and use it. Like that seems like a possible fix. I don't know, as I say, maybe it's not possible to do that. And I agree with the idea that the thing in Burnaby where rental victors must provide housing or find it for tenants and top up any shortfall. That just actually was along the lines of something that I've been thinking about as well, that landlords, whatever they're building or knocking down, they have to take responsibility for the people they're displacing, especially in today's market. And I was wondering if it wasn't even possible to say, like across the board, nobody's getting evicted until the market improves, that people can actually move out, because there is nowhere for people to move out to. If I had to leave my home tomorrow, I'd be looking for real estate under the Gardiner Expressway. I would be homeless, and it terrifies me. Let me just, I think I can see I'm running out of time.
Yeah, can you just wrap up, Benny, please? If you can,
yeah,
that's great.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, I think, I guess my biggest point was just related to the, because I don't think it has come up, that the landlord, like the smaller landlords in particular, have to be addressed in their needs, and either by giving them breaks on their property taxes, giving them grants and subsidies to upgrade old buildings that allow the old tenants to stay, and or providing subsidies to tenants to have somewhere to stay while the landlord's doing their renos, so that they're able to exercise their first right of refusal. So,
okay, thank you.
I'd say that about covers it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us. Thanks, Benny.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I am now, stop the clock. Thank you. I'm going to bring this now into our committee and see if there are any questions from Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks to staff on any of the... Yes? Councillor Bradford, did you have something? No? Okay. I'm just going to ask just talk about the data collection, but I'm interested in knowing, are there, you don't have a eviction assessment tool, but are there sample letters or things, a very clear guide as to if you get an N13 or an N12, here's the steps you should take?
Through the chair, Sherry, I could answer that if it's helpful. So we do have the website, toronto.ca/renter help. There are concrete steps on the website in terms of what to do and what not to do. We have, through your direction at the last committee, been developing a template letter in a Renovictions toolkit. The draft is prepared, and we're working to do some final stakeholder consultation and just testing of that material. The CXI team has a process where they actually test with end users to make sure it lands and it's helpful. But the website does have information on that and what can be used. And our intention is in the near future to have those template letters up and running. The N13 section is actually being updated, should be finalized today actually. That was more clear based on actually some discussions with stakeholders on how that was landing.
Okay, and tenants that get an N13 and then don't pay the rent think that, is that advised from legal or legal clinics, or is it advised to not get another N for non-payment? Is there any particular advice?
I don't know if Charlotte would like to answer that from legal.
Through the chair, that is not something that we have provided advice on as of yet, and not something that I've had a chance to look into. So I'm happy to do that and work with Sherry on any changes that need to be made to the website on that matter.
Are there any folks from legal clinics or legal background on your tenant advisory group?
Yes, there are. There are 4 members from legal clinics as well as FMTA, Sierra, and Acorn as well.
Would they not advise on some of those? Is that something that you can ask?
Yeah, we can ask them and make sure. That's where the end testing is happening right now. We've developed the content and we can go back and just refresh it with the members of the committee.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Members, I'm going to bring this in for speakers. Councillor Perks, Councillor Bradford, please. Yes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks very much to staff for the detailed presentation tonight. That was a fantastic update. I have a motion that I've submitted. If we could bring that up on the screen. And this is just a minor amendment here to the recommendations set out by our staff in the report. The staff have outlined the development of a data strategy in the draft work plan attachment. But I'd like to make sure that we lock this in for 2021 and make sure that we advance that work as quickly as possible. So just a minor amendment there. I think that we heard in the commentary from staff tonight in their presentation just how important having this information is, some of the gaps that exist, but the need to have excellent data when it comes to affordable rental protection to make sure that that's informing our policy and where we're directing our resources. Back in Planning and Housing in September, we approved this implementation plan for Housing TO, and the data piece was one of the areas of significant importance then. And I'd like to continue trying to tie that thread together as we move this forward through our subcommittee here tonight. The data strategy means finding the technological advancements and the numbers of what's actually happening here in Toronto. Without that information, it makes it very hard to, we have the anecdotal stories and experiences of folks from across the city, but without the concrete data, it makes it really hard to track the progress and understand how these evictions are actually taking place, where they're taking place, and how as a city we can develop our programs best to respond to that. I think the framework that we have also brings advancement on engagement tools. Appreciate staff taking the time to do that, recognizing that we need to reach more Torontonians, we need to reach them in different ways, and we need to reach as many tenants as possible across the entire city. The data is going to paint a picture, but it's also very much a work in progress. We saw some of those gaps. It shows us what's happening, but it also shows where we need more information, frankly, where there are those gaps. I think lastly, on the data point, I would just point that when we have that information, it strengthens our position as a council, as a city, with respect to policy and funding advocacy that we need to do at other levels of government, both provincially and federally. So it's about building on the existing work draft plan that we have and ensure that we're improving our engagement right from the start. And I will just say my gratitude again to our staff for getting this done, getting us here a year later after this subcommittee was established, and all the deputants who came out again tonight and have been participating in these meetings as we've gathered over the past year to share their stories, experiences, and inform the work that we're doing here tonight. That's it for me, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor. Councillor Perks, you're passing? Yep.
No, I'll just say
okay.
a couple of words.
Yeah, please.
I want to acknowledge the extraordinary importance of all the people who came out and spoke to us tonight. You know, we can get lost looking at PowerPoint presentations and thinking through city policies, but we have to remember that there's a real human tragedy taking place in the city of Toronto. It's been taking place for some time. It's been accelerating, and the pandemic has made it even more clear, which is that housing increasingly has become commodified, financialized in the Toronto market, and people are losing their homes as a result. Tenants are losing their homes. And, you know, kudos to you, Madam Chair, for establishing this committee and getting staff to do that work. But it really is hearing from tenants that brings it all home. There was a lot of frustration we heard tonight from people who clearly want some government that has authority to just put a stop to it. And you know, and you had a series of questions for one deputant where, you know, people feel so strongly that the city should be able to do something that they get frustrated when we can't. It may not be that we have the same powers as the provincial government and under, you know, pass and amend the landlord-tenant legislation and operate the tribunal. But I was very interested to see the 3 or 4 programs, EPIC and the Rent Bank and so on, where the city is providing direct help to people who are at risk of losing their home. Just the numbers, the data won't tell us very much because you can't really compare this year to any other year that's ever been. But what caught my eye is I think there's a potential, if the city increased the resources to those programs, that we could be providing both more help to each individual and help to more individuals. And while it's not really something that we can settle here at this committee tonight, the funding of those programs and the staffing behind those programs is something I'm certainly going to keep my eye on when the city launches its budget in 6 weeks. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we're very lucky to have both you and Councillor Bradford on this committee. I'll make a few remarks. I'm going to make a motion that is somewhat along the lines of yours, Councillor Bradford, and it's the Planning and Housing Committee direct the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat, and the General Manager, Shelter Support, Housing and Administration to engage the services of a consultant to explore options and feasibility to develop a process to permanently track and monitor formal and informal evictions, develop an interim measure to track formal and informal evictions during the COVID pandemic, provide a report to the Planning and Housing Committee first quarter of 2021 on this initiative. It does have to do again with tracking and data, which is one of the things that I know that, Sherry, you've said that high on your agenda, and I can see from your PowerPoint today that it is in many different places and that you are very eager to get that done. So just getting out there and understanding what's gone on in the community, what evictions have taken place, particularly rent evictions, as well as just N4s, but N12s, N13s. And in particular, I'm really interested in making sure that the website pieces are really easy for someone like Ms. Edwards to go and say, here's the steps you take. Here's the steps you take if you've got an N13 or an N12. The other thing that we need to look at, besides tracking what's happened, is we really need to look at where have tenant organizations and tenants been successful in preventing rent-evictions? What's worked? Has it been, no, just what has worked for that? Because the more practice we have in prevention, the better it will be for other people. And I think that, if anything, we're spending a lot of time looking at what's happened for the actual evictions. I'm also interested in having a tracking of successful prevention of evictions and rent-evictions. So we do have, and we'll be dealing with the EPIC and Tenant Defense Fund next up. But I think that really looking at what's available, what's working, what's not working, what's most frustrating when you get into these situations. And we don't normally have a tenant like Patricia Edwards with us tonight, who really and truly is facing having to leave her unit and being rent-evicted by a landlord. So whatever our system is set up in order to help folks like Patricia. And Patricia, I'll just tell you directly, I'll do whatever I need to do to help you and those others living at 25 Leduc stay in your homes. Because as we've always said, it's we can't keep building housing fast enough from people getting rent-evicted. And Ms. Leduc says she may have to get a tent, live in the field beside her place, because she can never find a spot that is comparable to the one she has now. So this is you are the real people. You're the real reason why we have this committee, and I really appreciate every single one of you being here tonight, giving us your thoughts, your lived experience as we move this together, and we work together to work for tenants and work to build platforms, programs, and prevention of rent-evictions and evictions in the City of Toronto. So thanks everybody for coming. I will also move, Madam Clerk, I will move the recommendations in the report as well. And we have 4 recommendations and a motion from Councillor Bradford and one from myself. And can we take those all together, or do we have to do them? We'll do, okay, we're going to do them individually from the clerk so people can see. So we'll start with yours, Councillor Bradford. Yeah, we're flashing it now. Yep, thank you. It's hard, and it is hard online. Thank you. Good amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Then we'll go to my motion. There it is. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then we will adopt, I believe, the item as amended. Thank you. The recommendations and the 2 amendments. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Good work, everybody. Okay, let's move now to the Tenant Support Grant Program updates, please. And we have a number of speakers for that, starting with Jordy Dent. Are you on the line, Jordy?
I am.
You are.
Can you
That's
hear me?
great. Yes, we can. Thank you very much. And I'm going to start your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Many of you have seen me at committee before. My name is Jordy Dent. I'm from the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. We're the agency that runs the outreach and organizing program and the tenant hotline that's mentioned on page 3, currently funded through the Tenant Defense Fund. We're here today to speak in support of the changes that are being proposed for the Tenant Defense Fund program. The bulk of today's suggestions relate to making the process for applying to grants easier. And this follows in the heels of making grant applications easier in 2017. Helping more tenants get access to legal representation to fight a greater variety of issues is a positive change and one that we support. Throughout our existence, we've maintained good working relationships with the Shelter Support and Housing Administration team, and we support the changes that we believe are going to benefit our work and the individuals and families we support. In the report that you have before you, we'd just like to echo the advisory committee feedback that Sherry was talking about earlier, specifically on the Tenant Defense Fund. The first bit of feedback was that existing programs should have broader eligibility criteria, higher funding levels to meet increased demand. And the changes as recommended are going to broaden that eligibility criteria for the grant program. They're now going to include N13 run eviction notices, demolitions. It's going to make it in general easier to apply for the TDF grant just by requiring 2 signatories. There's going to be a reduction in signatures required, which is great. The city is also increasing the affordability thresholds, increasing the grant amounts, and payment options that have caused some issues in the past. We support all these changes. The only other thing that I'll just very quickly end with, because I don't want to take up a lot of people's time, the second advisory committee feedback plank was that there's a lack of programs and supports for tenants, considering the number of renters in Toronto. And our hope that, support for tenants is going to be expanded in the near future. A small note that, in Quebec, almost every city neighborhood, for example, in Montreal, will have an FMTA-like office. There'll be, I think, something like 18 throughout the city. And we would hope that that kind of spread of tenant education rights throughout the city would happen in the near future. I'll end just very briefly with a note to quote Board of Health Chair Joe Cressy. He said that one of the hardest parts during COVID has been that the city's been trying to solve a crisis within a crisis, which is he was supposed to be talking about the homelessness issue and trying to find people housing during a pandemic. And I feel that, as we've been saying for years, an increase in tenant services could really help come in handy now by keeping people in housing. So we hope that the committee is able to act upon that and council is able to act upon that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Jordie Dent? No. Thanks all very much for your work and for being part of that advisory committee, Jordie. Appreciate it. Aaron Kaplan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're pleased to see the modifications to the Tenant Support Grant Program. The modifications will definitely lessen the administrative burden for tenants, as well as make the program accessible to a wider group of tenants. With respect to the program guidelines, we're very concerned that the program guidelines can be updated at the discretion of the General Manager, Shelter Support and Housing Administration. This is contrary to the proposal outlined in Agenda Item 4.2, which proposes that all tenant-focused city programs consult with the newly established Tenant Advisory Committee. We propose that any changes to the program guidelines be discussed with the Tenant Advisory Committee in a timely manner and report back to the Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing and the Planning and Housing Committee annually on any changes made to the program guidelines in previous years. With respect to the increased grant levels, the city's Protection of Affordable Rental Housing Advisory Group requested that the Tenant Support Grant Program increase its grant levels to reflect the true cost of legal services. The program did not address this request, even though the program was fully utilized in 2018 and 2019. In fact, the program has added disputes of N13's applications as eligibility requirement without any additional funding. In addition, grants of up to $15,000 will now be available for tenant groups to engage in other legal processes impacting the affordability of rental housing in the private market. However, if any of these grants are approved, the total number of grants available for tenants will decrease. The grant amount will increase to $1,250. However, the maximum number of grants available each year for tenant groups will decrease from 100 to 80. Finally, the decrease to a minimum of 5 units in the rental building, as well as reducing the number of applicants or signatories to 2 tenant applicants, will be significant factors in driving up the demand for the program. $150,000 was available in the first year of the program in 2000 for tenant support grants. The current program budget of 100 is 100,000. The current budget represents, please follow this, 0.00007% of property taxes collected from landlords. The current budget allocation is woefully inadequate in supporting tenants struggling to pay their current rent prior to the additional long-term impact of an AGI rent increase. We strongly recommend that the program budget allocation be increased to its original $150,000 effective budget year 2021. In 1999, staff was asked to consider a funding level for this program of 1/5 of 1% of property tax received from tenant-occupied buildings, and that was $1.3 million in 1999 dollars. This item raises the much larger question of how much of the property tax paid by landlords should be allocated to tenant programs. We must remember that 47% of households are living in rental housing. I want to quickly deal with landlord AGI supporting documentation to the LTD, particularly technical documentation, which are complex documents beyond the comprehension of the average tenant. Tenants need more help under the tenant support grant programs, not less help in defending themselves against unreasonable expenditures added to AGI submissions. I want to close with an excerpt from the 1990 report, Implementation of a Tenant Defense Fund. Given the city's interest in protecting the affordable housing stock, we have an interest in the outcome of these applications. Taking steps to avoid large above guideline increases for low-income tenants may be cost-effective in that significantly increased rents can lead to economic evictions, which puts greater pressure on city-funded rent bank and hostel service programs.
Could you wrap up shortly?
Yes, I am.
Aaron,
this is my very last statement.
Thank you.
20 years later, we have not made significant advances in reducing the size of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Aaron? No, thank you. I'll call on Dan McIntyre, please, paralegal for tenants. Dan, are you with us? Are you online?
Yes.
Yep, please, you've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. Dan McIntyre. I am a private paralegal now, but many of you might remember me from my olden days. And first of all, I'm here to support the recommendations. Keep that simple. I thought maybe we would give you a little history like the previous gentleman did. The program started in 1999. Well, it was voted on in 1999, started in 2000. It passed the city council by one vote. And one of the people opposed to even having that program was the mayor of the day, Mel Lastman. Subsequently, I was recruited by the Federation of Metro Tenants. I worked in Ottawa for 18 years doing above guideline cases, organizing advocacy and outreach. I'm old now, I don't do it much anymore. To head up the outreach and organizing team, and to start working with community groups, but also with the paralegals who would be representing the tenants. And the $1,000 payment to paralegals at the time seemed pretty fair because they were going to get help from the outreach and organizing team, and they would have collaboration. We often reviewed the cases, showed them some of did the preparation, did a lot of the education for the tenants. With that success, myself and Marcia Berry, who's a terrific, now she's a labor lawyer, we were able to help hundreds of groups. And in fact, the city recognized that and increased the funding exponentially over the 10 years that I was there. So that's just a little history. Unfortunately, what the remaining weakness in the program, though, is the current organizing and outreach team. They really are not reaching enough people. They don't have enough expertise. And often their role seems to be handing the people a grant application and saying, fill it in. In fact, they have now adopted a policy that they will not work with paralegals. Can you believe that? I remember a case last year where the tenants had already contacted me, had wanted to work with me. The Federation set up a meeting on their own and basically said they wouldn't come if I was there or any other paralegal. And they kind of got into hiding, and I now have to do their work as well as my work, which is educating the tenants as to the process, the rough parts of AGI cases. Can't sugarcoat them and just say, well, you say this and everything will go away. It's a difficult process, and it's a technical process. I've suggested to the Federation they should hire a paralegal, not me. My days are gone. I appreciate that. That would be able to do legal work. There are paralegals graduating from community colleges every day, and if they get involved in landlord-tenant law, they work for landlords. We're not recruiting anybody. So I do encourage the city to find ways to make that outreach and organizing work. There are better ways, and to not accept what has been happening with the organizing and outreach team. One bootleg comment on rent evictions, by the way. I listened to all the presentations. It's important to know what the Act says. The Act says that the landlord can apply for an eviction where the renovations are so extensive as to require a work permit and vacant possession. They get the work permits from the city. So I'm wondering just how much care the city puts into when they get work permits, I guess with attached with a fee, in permitting them, which starts the ball rolling. I think that's a point of entry that we should be looking more closely at in order to prevent rent evictions and other evictions that are happening all over the city. I'm always quite willing to work with the city and to give my thoughts and to try to keep working to help individual tenant groups with their cases. We've had a share of successes, failures. That's the way it goes in the legal business, and we'll keep on doing that. But we can do a lot better, and we need more expertise and more from the organizing and outreach team to make the program more successful. And I continue to look forward to work with tenant groups. Fortunately, the only people who pay me are my clients, and I only work for tenants. So, and nobody can make a living just doing that. Pension helps. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Right on time. Thank you. Any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Mariana Lewicki, please.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, you're on.
Okay, great. So Mariana Lewicki, I'm the president of the Park Vista Tenants Association. Thanks for being here and letting me speak. And I do want to say I sympathize with the city, because my understanding, this provision that, municipalities are the creatures of the province came in a time where 20% of people lived in cities, and now it's more like 80% of people living in cities. So it's a minority oppressed. But so I do get it that the jurisdiction only goes so far. So, but during COVID, we like to hear, we do hear that we're all in the same boat, but it does seem like some people are in, leaky rowboats in a storm, and others are on a yacht on glassy waters sliding across very blue seas with nice skies. And that's sort of what I want to talk about. I was at the, demonstration or the rally outside Patricia's Edwards building on Saturday. And then this afternoon at 4 p.m., I was at Dentonia Park, where 50 families are facing potential eviction in what seems to be an assembly line of, maybe it's more like a, virtual slaughterhouse for tenants going through the LTB, where apparently hearings are as quick as 5 minutes. Sometimes people don't speak English. They're, it's not their first language. They don't know what's going on. They're overwhelmed. They're being asked to pay apparently $1,000, on top of their monthly rent on a repayment plan, or they're out. It's horrifying. So I get it that we're not going to solve all that tonight, but it is. I think there's time to recognize that there are people that are the equivalent of Ebenezer Scrooge before he has the visit of the ghost of Christmas past and the ghost of the future. And I don't know that those ghosts are going to visit this season. So I want to talk about a landlord that's making $1,000 operating profit every minute of every day for the first 9 months of this year. And they're putting through above guideline rent increases. For the first 9 months of 2020, they put through above guideline increase applications covering 8,107 units. That is an 84% increase from 2019, where they put through AGIs covering 4,409 units. Why is that material to me? It seems like there's frequent flyers in the AGI system. And I'm hoping that there may be a way for cities to look at some way to shift the cost to these frequent flyers. I'm on a street with 4 buildings. All 4 of them have had at least one AGI. A second one is coming through on another building. So they're shifting, millions of costs to tenants. During a pandemic, people are getting hit with 4.7% increases. Why? Is it because the landlord doesn't have the money? No. My understanding, speaking to an MPP, was that the above guideline rent increase application was brought in. The policy intent was to protect tenants from having a building fall into disrepair if the landlord did not have the financial means, either through the rental income stream or their balance sheet, to carry out repairs to make a building safe and secure. I agree that landlords should not have to choose between financial solvency and tenant safety, but that is what's happening here. AGIs are being used as a tool to shift predictable repair costs to tenants so that the unit holders can benefit handsomely. And at the same time, and again, I recognize not municipal jurisdiction, at the federal level, these REITs are getting a sweetheart tax deal. They're paying no tax at the trust level. The theory is it's supposed to be paid out when they pay it to unit holders, but you look at CAPREIT's 2019 guidance, 70% of the money going to unit holders is not taxable. So they're getting a free ride on the tax, level at the federal level. You might want to speak to your counterparts there. You might also want to actually sit down. I keep hearing about one of the CAPREIT officials bragging about what a great relationship he's got with John Tory. Maybe John Tory can sit down and ask, why are you doing this to these people at this time? Is there not another way to do repairs? Maybe through the rental income stream, set aside 10%. That would make things a lot better. I know I'm up on time. I do appreciate the changes, and I to the defense fund, I would wish it would disappear in the future because nobody would have to use it.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariana, for being with us tonight in your deputation. Does anyone have questions? Mariana? No? Thank you. Helen, you would like to speak to us on this item, please. Are you back with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I was disconnected there for a moment, but
Okay.
I'm back. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Helen Chillis, and I'm with the 1501 Woodbine Tenants Group. We now have received our first above guideline increase notice from our landlord. We're all confused. It is near next to impossible to organize. I have been in touch with everyone I can think of to get some assistance. But again, I'm finding that many of my neighbors, especially there's been a lot of people moving and coming and going in our building the last 5 years. We've had a lot of problems with our building. And so I need, and my committee needs to start re-educating our neighbors again. We have a lot of individuals who are new in the country, many who don't speak, who aren't fluent in English. So I'm needing to try to sort out a way to be able to communicate to everyone in a way that everyone in our building that could in fact be upwards of 1,000 people, so we're all on the same page. As far as the Tenant Defense Fund, I have received information from the FMTA about how to go forward. They did follow through with some ideas, suggestions, et cetera, et cetera. I do recognize that because of the backlog with the Landlord Tenant Board and the tribunal, that our case may not be heard for quite some time. It might even be a year, 2 years from now. However, we do need to start organizing. We are at quite a disadvantage. The landlord here refuses adamantly to release details as to what exactly they would like for us to pay for, because not much is going on in our building. We're starting to suspect we're going to be dealing, part of the above guideline increase, we'll be dealing with new energy efficient toilets. How do I know? It's because approximately 30 units were given notice last week to enter in the middle of COVID so they can measure our toilets. And the feedback that I have been receiving from my neighbors, I'm not even sure if the contractor, in fact, followed all COVID-19 protocols as required, and even stated in the letter with the notice to enter the units. The amount that's available at this time, even though I'm very thankful that there is some funds, there are funds available for tenants to fight Aggies. However, after speaking to just a few paralegals, their rates justifiably are quite high. I've received on average, I think, $150 to $175 an hour. That amount won't go very far with the amount available to us with the Tenant Defense Fund. It also is very concerning that we may not be able to properly represent ourselves because of the lack of available funding and the lack of expertise that we have reading technical documents that we probably will not have access to until approximately a month prior to a date being set. So that puts us at yet another disadvantage. I'm hoping that perhaps the city may be able to intervene here because if we are able to apply for legal funding, then the city does have a major, they play a major role in the funding and may be able to help guide us through what exactly the landlord is planning to do so we can start preparing before we hire a legal defense team. And the other concern that I do have with the proposed funding, I do like the fact that some of the criteria have been reduced in nature with the amount of individuals needing to sign off in order to apply for funding. The amount of actual applicants per year, the reduction is counterproductive when it comes to providing affordable housing here in the city. That amount actually should be increased. The amount of applicants that are approved should in fact be increased, not decreased, because I'm certain that more are coming, not just like what we're experiencing right now, but also
Helen,
in the near future. Yes, I know my time is running out.
Can you wrap up, please? Thank you.
Yes. So again, thank you for everything. I'm not looking forward to this huge legal battle, but hopefully we'll be able to succeed. And I do appreciate everyone's time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing tonight, being with us. Our last deputant is Melissa Bowen from the Center for Equality Rights. Melissa, are you with us?
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and your time has started.
Hi. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I'm here on behalf of the Center for Equality, Rights and Accommodation, CERA. Firstly, the city's work on tenant rights and eviction prevention continues to move in the right direction, and we are thrilled to see the city stepping up in these areas. We commend city staff and members of the subcommittee on the work undertaken to date, and we support efforts by the city to make tenant-facing support services more accessible, flexible, and streamlined. These efforts could not have come at a more crucial time. Over the past decade, CERA has watched as the circumstances of people who call our eviction prevention hotline have become progressively complex, urgent, and desperate. The increasingly difficult situation for renters has resulted in escalating demand for CERA's eviction prevention services over the years, which COVID has accelerated. In September 2020, we shared with this committee that the volume of client requests for our services had doubled, and since that time, the increased demand has remained steady. As the fallout from COVID-19 continues and more people are facing eviction, services like those provided by CERA and other organizations are likely to remain oversubscribed. To begin to address this increased demand for eviction prevention services, CERA is urging the city to broaden its service offerings and to make their existing services more flexible and accessible to the increasingly complex and urgent realities experienced by tenants facing eviction across Toronto. We are pleased to see the city is committed to ensuring these services reflect the health and safety related challenges for tenants caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. In particular, we support the proposed changes to the Tenant Defense Fund Program guidelines, which will make this program more flexible and accessible during COVID and beyond. Removing administration barriers, allowing a shift to online applications, and adding disputes of N13 applications as an eligible application type are positive developments. Given the increasingly complex and rapidly changing nature of eviction trends across the city, we especially support the broadening of SSHA's discretion to approve a wider range of application types and other tenant-led legal efforts aimed at preserving affordable private market rental housing. We applaud the creation of an online option for applications. However, it is important to ensure that barriers are not inadvertently placed on individuals without reliable access to internet. As such, we encourage the city to continue to allow paper-based applications. We are concerned with the proposed decrease to the maximum number of grants available each year for tenant groups from 100 to 80. We note that the general manager's report references the fact that uptake from the Tenant Defense Fund grants are consistently high, and funding was fully utilized in both 2018 and 2019. While we applaud the proposed increase to $1,250 for the grant amount available to tenants, this increase should not come at the expense of the number of grants available. As such, we encourage the city to implement the long overdue increase to the grant amount available to tenants while maintaining the maximum number of grants available. Upfront investment in preventative services is critical and ultimately less costly than dealing with the fallout from widespread evictions. And finally, we applaud the city's efforts in this regard and would encourage the city to continue to explore creative and expansive ways to prevent evictions as a key tool in the fight to protect affordable rental housing. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of Melissa? No, Melissa, I just have one thing, and I noticed from your written deputation as well that you're quite concerned that any applications are not solely based on the internet. Have you had any feedback for that? An agreement? I'll ask city staff about that too when we get a chance to question them. Can you elaborate a little bit, please?
I don't have any feedback about the online applications. However, if you give me some time, I can go back to our organization and see if we have anything about that and follow up with you through email. That's okay.
Well, you did say that you're concerned about the internet limit, that you don't want to.
So my understanding from that concern is that we just want to make sure that the city would continue with paper-based applications.
Okay.
So not to
I'll ask staff.
paper-based applications, but to add to the paper-based applications with online options.
I will clarify that during my questions, just to give you some peace. We'll find out if that's changing at all.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks so much for being here tonight, and thank you to all of the deputants who spent this evening. We did have this committee in the evening in order for people to be able to attend broadly. That's why we're meeting at night. So we're at 9:30, and I'm going to see if there's any questions of staff on this report from either you, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks. No. I will just ask that question to you, to somebody, maybe you, Ms. Hanley, or Doug Rollins, and it just has to do with accepting applications. There is a concern that somehow it would change and you would be cutting off written or paper applications in favor of only internet applications. Can you just give us an idea of if that's the case, please?
No, it's not the case. We're going to be enhancing options through the availability of online fillable forms, but they'll be able to print them manually and submit as they do today.
Okay, perfect. So I think that's been cleared up. I think that's an important question. So thank you for clearing that up. Thank you for being here. Okay, we'll take this into committee for any discussion on this item. Anybody have any motions or anything to say? If not, I do have a motion before we move to accept the recommendations, and this motion is actually got to do with increasing the tenant defense fund to maintain the current service levels of 100 grants per year. We've heard from the deputants how important that is, and given that it's going from 1,000 to 1,250, that we don't want to cut down the number of folks that are able to get that money, and another 75,000 to provide sufficient funds given the expanded role of the Tenant Defence Fund and the impacts of the lockdowns during the 2020 pandemic, which resulted in many residents losing wages and thus facing severe challenges with paying rent. So that is my motion that I hope we can support going through to the budget, directing that we don't fall behind on the tenant defense. So, any questions of the mover? No? Okay. Are you on the budget committee, Councillor Bradford?
I am, yeah.
Good. Well, let's hope that we can make this happen. We've heard how important it is. Thank you. Do you feel like you can vote on this? You're feeling uncomfortable, or are you okay? Up to you.
We can vote on it.
Okay.
Yep. No. Yep. Happy to vote with you on this.
Good. Thank you so much. Okay. All those in favor? Oh, pardon? Of the amendment. Yes, of the amendment. Okay, that's passed. And then you can lower your hand now, Councillor Perks. But now you're going to put it back up again when we vote on the recommendations. The item as amended. All in favor? That's it. Thank you very much, and that passes. I think we'd be wrong if we didn't just give a motion of thanks to everyone who's participated in the Tenant Advisory Committee. We're suggesting it become permanent, so it would move to a permanent committee. I don't know if all the members will remain there, so I would just like to give our committee's thanks to all the tenants that participated and thank them very much. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And of course to all the staff who've made such a difference and are working very hard for affordable rental housing in all forms, keeping people in their homes, helping them with above guideline increases, rent safe, and building new housing, and putting people, assisting people when they become homeless. So thank you very much. And thank you, clerks, for being here late tonight. And with that, unless there's any big issues, we will adjourn, ask for adjournment. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll see you all on Wednesday. Bye.
Great job, Madam Chair.
you.
Thanks, staff.
Good night, everybody.